The call came at 6:12 in the morning, too early for good news, too late to be a mistake. I remember because I was parked at a rest stop 3 states away, engine still ticking as it cooled, my phone buzzing against the empty coffee cup in the holder. I almost didn't answer. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something in my gut tightened. And when I picked up, the first thing my property manager said was, "Hey, I don't know how to tell you this, but your electricity bill is over $12,000. 12,000. At first, I thought it was a joke, the kind of dry humor people use when they're trying to wake you up. I laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Yeah, right. Maybe someone wired my apartment into a stadium." Silence. Then he said quietly, "I wish that was the case." That's when my stomach dropped so hard it felt like the ground tilted. Because here's the thing. I'm on the road 20 days a month. I barely live there. And in that moment, sitting alone in my car while the sun crept over a cold parking lot, I realized something was very, very wrong. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is my story of betrayal, and if you've ever trusted the wrong person, hit that subscribe button because you are not alone. Here is how it happened. I was reading comments on my YouTube videos the other day, and I realized I wasn't the only one who had experienced something like this. So many people shared stories about trust, about believing in someone who seemed safe, until one day the truth came crashing in like a wrecking ball. But back then, I had no idea what was coming. I just knew one thing. There was no way my empty apartment could rack up a power bill that big. No way. Unless someone else was using it. At first, I tried to stay calm, logical. Maybe there was a billing error. Maybe someone mixed up meter numbers. Maybe the utility company screwed something up. That's what I told myself as I sat there gripping my phone, knuckles pale. But my property manager's voice didn't sound like someone dealing with a simple mistake. He sounded uneasy. The kind of uneasy that comes when you're about to say something you don't want to say. "Look," he told me, lowering his voice, "I checked the meter personally yesterday." My throat tightened. "And?" He hesitated. "It's spinning like crazy." That's when my mind started racing, because meters don't spin like crazy in empty apartments. They spin when something is running, or many things, constantly. I remember staring at my windshield, watching a trucker cross the lot with a thermos in his hand, completely unaware that my life was starting to tilt off balance. "Are you sure it's my unit?" I asked. "Positive." He paused again before adding something that made my chest tighten even more. "And there's something else." I didn't breathe. "What?" He hesitated. "I've had noise complaints." My heart skipped. "Noise?" I repeated. "Yes, at night." That didn't make sense because I hadn't been home in nearly 3 weeks. And suddenly, a cold thought crept into my mind like a shadow slipping under a door. Someone might be inside my apartment. At first, I dismissed it. I had to. The idea was too absurd, too invasive, too terrifying. Who would do that? How would they even get in? My apartment wasn't some abandoned building. It was a secured complex with keycard access. No one could just walk in, right? But the more my property manager talked, the less that reassurance held. He mentioned neighbors reporting lights on at all hours, footsteps late at night, and once a loud crash that someone described as furniture being dragged. Each detail hit me like a hammer because every single one confirmed the same horrifying possibility. Someone was living in my home without my knowledge. I felt my pulse pounding in my ears. "Why didn't you call me sooner?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I thought maybe you'd come back early, or maybe you had guests staying." Guests. The word stung, because there was only one person who had a spare key, only one person who knew my schedule, my travel patterns, the long stretches when I'd be gone. Someone I trusted completely, someone I never would have suspected. I hung up after promising him I'd handle it, but I didn't move. I just sat there in my car staring at nothing, because deep down, I already knew. My mind was replaying conversations, small moments I'd dismissed before, little things that now felt like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. And the more I thought about it, the more one name kept surfacing, one face, one voice, one person who had been in my life for years, someone who knew my routines better than anyone else, someone who had access. My hands trembled as I scrolled my contacts. I hovered over their name. I wanted to believe I was wrong. I needed to be wrong, because if I wasn't, it meant the betrayal wasn't just about electricity bills. It meant something far worse, something that would change how I saw trust forever. Just as I was about to call, my property manager texted me again. 3 words. Police were here. My heart stopped. I opened the message thread, my vision blurring. Another text appeared seconds later. They found something inside. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just someone crashing at my place. This was something much darker, something I never could have imagined. And I had absolutely no idea what they found in my apartment would lead to the most shocking betrayal of my life. I didn't call back right away. I couldn't. My fingers hovered over the screen while my heart pounded so violently it felt like it was trying to break out of my chest. Every worst-case scenario slammed into my mind at once. A break-in, a squatter, criminal activity, or something even worse. The message just sat there. They found something inside. I typed back with shaking hands. What did they find? The reply took less than 10 seconds, but it felt like 10 minutes. "You need to come back. It's serious." That was it. No explanation, no detail, just a blunt, heavy statement that landed like a stone in my stomach. And suddenly, the distance between me and home felt unbearable. I started the engine without even thinking. The GPS showed 14 hours of driving, 14 hours of questions, 14 hours of dread crawling under my skin. The road stretched ahead of me like an endless gray ribbon, and as the miles passed, my mind kept replaying every detail my property manager had mentioned. Noise at night, lights on, furniture being dragged. It didn't sound like someone casually crashing there. It sounded like someone living there, settled, comfortable, like they believed they belonged. And that thought, more than anything, made my stomach twist, because it meant whoever it was didn't think they were doing anything wrong. About 2 hours into the drive, my phone rang again. It was him, my property manager. I answered immediately, my voice tight. "Tell me what's going on." He exhaled slowly before speaking, like he was choosing his words carefully. "The police were called because neighbors reported a strong smell." My grip tightened on the steering wheel. "What kind of smell?" He hesitated. "Chemical." A cold chill slid down my spine. Chemical? That word didn't belong anywhere near my home. "What did they find?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Another pause. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "They found a full setup in your living room." I swallowed hard. "Setup for what?" His answer came quietly. Industrial equipment, high-power machines, extension wiring everywhere. My mind struggled to process it. That explained the electricity bill, but it raised an even bigger question. Why would anyone set up industrial equipment inside an apartment? The rest of the drive became a blur of anxiety and imagination. Every possibility felt worse than the last. Illegal operations, fraud, something dangerous. And through it all, one thought kept returning again and again like a persistent echo. Who had access to my key? Because this wasn't random. No stranger could have pulled this off without getting caught immediately. This required planning, knowledge, timing. It required someone who knew when I was gone and for how long. And there was only one person who fit that description perfectly. As the hours dragged on, memories started surfacing, small moments I'd ignored before, like the time they casually asked how long my next trip would be, or when they joked about how empty my place must feel while I was away, or that one moment months ago when I walked in unexpectedly early. I remembered it clearly now. They'd been inside, said they just stopped by to water my plants. At the time, it seemed thoughtful, normal, caring. But now it felt different. Now it felt like something else entirely. Night had fallen by the time I reached the city. Streetlights cast long shadows across the roads, and every red light felt like torture. When I finally pulled into the apartment complex parking lot, my heart was racing so hard it felt like I might pass out. There were 2 police cars parked near my building. That alone made my stomach drop. I stepped out of the car slowly, my legs trembling slightly. The air smelled faintly metallic, sharp, unnatural. And suddenly, a terrible realization hit me. This wasn't just a simple squatter situation. Something serious had happened here. My property manager was waiting near the entrance. He looked more stressed than I'd ever seen him. The moment he saw me, he walked quickly. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded automatically, even though I absolutely wasn't. "Tell me everything." He glanced around before speaking quietly. "The police think someone's been running a crypto mining operation inside your apartment." I blinked. "A what?" "Crypto mining. Rows of machines that run non-stop to generate digital currency. They use insane amounts of electricity." The pieces slammed together instantly. The massive bill, the constant power usage, the heat, the noise. It all made sense now. But that didn't make it any less shocking. Someone had turned my home into an illegal energy-draining operation. Without my knowledge, without my permission. My voice felt distant when I spoke. "How long?" He hesitated. "Probably months." Months! The word hit me like a punch. That meant this wasn't recent. It had been happening while I lived my life completely unaware. Traveling, working, trusting everything was fine. All while someone else had been secretly occupying my space, using it, exploiting it, and costing me thousands. I felt anger rising now, hot and sharp. Did they catch who did it? My property manager shook his head slowly. No one was there when police entered, but... He paused. "But what?" He reached into his folder and pulled out something, a printed photo. When he handed it to me, my hands started shaking immediately, because it wasn't a picture of equipment, it wasn't wiring, it wasn't machines. It was a picture of a table inside my apartment, and on that table was something unmistakable, something that made my entire body go cold. A framed photograph of me standing next to someone I trusted more than anyone else. My throat tightened as realization crashed over me. The police hadn't found that photo by accident. It was placed there, visible, intentional, like whoever had been running the operation wanted to make it clear whose space it was. and who they were connected to. My voice barely worked as I whispered, "Did they find any personal belongings?" My property manager nodded slowly. "Yes." My heart pounded. "Whose?" He hesitated, his eyes filled with discomfort. Then he said the name I had feared, the one I had hoped desperately I was wrong about. And the moment I heard it, everything inside me shattered, because it confirmed the truth I had been trying not to face. The person behind all of this was someone I loved. But what I didn't know yet was that this betrayal was only the beginning, because when the police finished searching my apartment that night, they uncovered something far more disturbing than illegal machines, something hidden, something personal, something that would turn this from a story about illegal electricity into a nightmare I never could have imagined. For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. I couldn't even breathe properly. The name my property manager said just echoed inside my head over and over like a broken recording. Because it wasn't just someone I trusted, it was the person I trusted the most, someone who had been in my life for years, someone who knew my habits, my routines, my fears, my dreams, someone who had sat across from me at dinner tables, laughed with me late at night, listened when I was exhausted after long work trips, someone who had hugged me goodbye every time I left town. And now, standing in that dimly lit apartment hallway, I realized that same person had been secretly living in my home, using it, exploiting it, turning it into something illegal. My voice came out hollow. "Are you absolutely sure?" My property manager didn't answer immediately. He just nodded slowly. "The police found their ID in one of the drawers." That was it. No more doubt, no more hope that this was some kind of misunderstanding. The truth was solid now, heavy, unavoidable. I don't remember walking to my apartment door. I don't remember unlocking it. I only remember the moment it opened, because the smell hit me first. Hot plastic, dust, metal, a faint burnt scent that clung to the air like a warning. Then I stepped inside, and my world tilted. My living room was unrecognizable. Where my couch had been was now a maze of black metal racks stacked with humming machines. Cables ran across the floor like tangled vines. Fans roared constantly, pushing waves of hot air through the room. The soft, warm home I had carefully built was gone. It looked like an industrial facility now, cold, mechanical, invaded. I stood there frozen, staring at what used to be my safe space. And for the first time, the betrayal didn't feel abstract. It felt physical, like someone had reached inside my life and ripped it apart piece by piece. A police officer approached me gently. "You're the tenant?" he asked. I nodded. He spoke carefully, like he knew how hard this was. "This operation was running nearly 24/7, extremely high electricity draw. It's why your bill skyrocketed." My throat tightened. "How long has it been going on?" He glanced at his notes. "Based on system logs and equipment wear, at least 5 months." 5 months! I felt dizzy. 5 months of my home being used behind my back. 5 months of deception. 5 months of someone walking through my door while I was miles away, trusting everything was fine. Then the officer said something that made my stomach drop even further. "There's more we need to show you." My chest tightened. "More?" He nodded. "Yes, we found something in your bedroom." My heart began pounding instantly. Because the living room alone had already shattered me. What else could there possibly be? Walking down that hallway felt unreal. Every step felt heavier than the last, like I was moving towards something I didn't want to see but couldn't escape. The officer opened my bedroom door slowly, and the moment I stepped inside, my breath caught. The room wasn't destroyed, it was worse. It was lived in. My bed was made, but not the way I made it. My pillows had different covers. My nightstand had items that didn't belong to me. Clothes hung in my closet that weren't mine. Shoes lined the floor, perfume bottles, chargers, personal belongings. It looked like someone had been sleeping there every night, like it was their home, not mine. And suddenly, the violation felt deeper than anything else. Because this wasn't just about money or electricity. Someone had taken over my private space, my most personal sanctuary. They had lived inside my life. I felt my knees weaken. Why? Why would they do this? I whispered. The officer hesitated before answering. We believe they were using your absence to run the mining operation and stay here without paying rent elsewhere. His words echoed painfully. They weren't just stealing electricity, they were saving money, living comfortably, using my trust as their cover. Then he added something quietly. There's something else we found. I closed my eyes briefly. I wasn't sure I could handle anything more, but I nodded. He walked over to my dresser and opened the top drawer. Inside was a notebook, worn, thick, filled with handwritten notes. My stomach dropped instantly because I recognized it. It belonged to them. My hands shook as I picked it up. The pages were filled with dates, schedules, detailed notes. My travel plans, my departure times, my return estimates, even notes about when neighbors were usually home. It wasn't random. It was planned, carefully, methodically, like they had been studying my life, mapping it, using it. I flipped through the pages, my vision blurring. Then I saw something that made my chest tighten painfully. A sentence written in bold letters near the back. Perfect setup. They trust me completely. The words hit like a knife because they confirmed what I had feared most. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was calculated betrayal. Tears blurred my vision as I closed the notebook. The officer watched me quietly. I'm sorry, he said softly. I know this is hard. But he wasn't finished, because then he said something that made my entire body go cold. We also found evidence they weren't working alone. My head snapped up. What? He nodded gravely. Yes, there are records of multiple people coming and out, logs, messages, equipment orders. My pulse skyrocketed. This wasn't just one person exploiting me, it was a network, a group, and my home had been the center of it all. I felt like the ground beneath me disappeared, because suddenly this wasn't just about betrayal, it was about something much bigger, something darker, and something far more dangerous. Then the officer said the words that made my blood run cold. We need to ask you some questions, because based on what we found, they were planning to expand the operation soon. My heart stopped. Expand? Inside my home? And that's when I realized if I hadn't gotten that phone call about the electricity bill, this could have continued for months, maybe years, right under my nose. But I still didn't know the worst part yet, because what the police would show me next would reveal that this betrayal wasn't just financial, it wasn't just personal. It was something far more disturbing, something that would make me question every single moment I had ever shared with that person. And when I saw it, I would realize that the truth was far more terrifying than I ever imagined. I didn't want to see anything else. I had already seen too much. My living room turned into a machine farm. My bedroom turned into someone else's living space. My trust turned into something ugly and calculated. But the officer's expression told me this next part wasn't optional. It was important, serious, and possibly dangerous. "Please," he said gently, "we need you to come to the dining area." My legs felt heavy as I followed him down the hallway. Each step felt like I was walking deeper into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The dining table was cleared except for a few items laid out neatly in evidence bags. At first glance, they looked ordinary: a phone, a laptop, some printed papers. But then I noticed something else: a small black device, thin, flat, unfamiliar, and something about it made my stomach tighten instantly. "What is that?" I asked quietly. The officer looked at me carefully before answering. "It's a hidden camera." My mind went completely blank. "A what?" "A concealed recording device," he repeated gently. For a moment, I couldn't even process the words. A hidden camera inside my apartment, inside my home, inside the place I thought was safe. My heart started pounding so loudly it echoed in my ears. "Where was it?" I whispered. The officer hesitated. Then he said something that made the room spin. "It was installed in your bedroom." Everything inside me went cold. My chest tightened so sharply I had to grip the edge of the table to stay upright. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice trembling. He nodded. "It was hidden in a smoke detector casing." The words felt unreal, like they belonged in a crime documentary, not in my life, because suddenly this wasn't just about someone using my home. It was about something far more invasive, far more violating. I felt sick, physically sick, because my mind immediately started racing through memories. Moments when I had been home, changing clothes, sleeping, living my private life, all while a camera might have been recording, watching, capturing, without my knowledge, without my consent, without any mercy. My voice cracked as I asked the question I was most afraid of. "Did it record anything?" The officer paused, then nodded slowly. "Yes." My knees almost gave out, because that single word confirmed my worst fear. Someone hadn't just taken over my space. They had invaded my privacy in the most intimate way possible. I covered my mouth, trying to steady my breathing. "Why would they do that?" I whispered. The officer's voice was careful, measured. "We don't know yet, but based on the device's storage and connected files, it appears recordings were being saved and possibly transferred." Transferred. The word hit like a punch. Transferred to where? To who? For what purpose? The thought made my entire body tremble, because suddenly the betrayal wasn't just personal anymore. It felt dangerous, exploitive, terrifying. I felt anger rising now, hot, sharp, uncontrollable. Not just anger, rage, because this crossed every possible line. Trust, privacy, safety, everything had been violated. Did they watch me?" I asked, barely able to say the words. The officer didn't answer immediately. His silence told me enough. Then he said softly, "There are timestamps from when you were present in the apartment." The world tilted. I felt like the air had been knocked out of my lungs, because that meant one horrifying truth. They hadn't just used my apartment when I was away. They had been recording me when I was home, too. The betrayal hit a new level in that moment, because this wasn't about money. This wasn't about convenience. This wasn't even about opportunism. This was something calculated, deliberate, deeply disturbing. And suddenly, every memory I had with that person felt poisoned. Every smile, every conversation, every moment of trust, all of it now felt like it had been a lie. My hands trembled as I stared at the evidence on the table. The laptop, the phone, the camera. Each item felt like proof of a different layer of betrayal. Then I noticed something else inside one of the clear bags, a stack of printed pages. I pointed at them weakly. "What are those?" The officer looked at them grimly. "Those appear to be logs and records of footage." My heart pounded harder. "Footage records?" He nodded. "Yes, organized by date, time, and categories." Categories. The word made my stomach twist because it suggested something methodical, something planned, something far more sinister than I had even imagined. I didn't want to ask the next question, but I had to. "What kind of categories?" The officer hesitated. Then he answered quietly, "Personal activities." The room felt like it closed in around me, because now the truth was undeniable. The person I trusted most had secretly recorded my private life, systematically, over time, and possibly shared it. Tears blurred my vision as reality settled in. This wasn't just betrayal, it was violation, in the deepest sense. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The sadness turned into something harder, colder, a determination I had never felt before, because I realized something important. I wasn't just a victim here. I was the key witness, and whoever did this would have to face consequences. But just as I was trying to gather myself, the officer said something that made my heart stop again. "There's one more thing you need to know." I looked up slowly, dread flooding back. "What?" He took a deep breath. "We believe there may be other victims." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" He met my eyes. "We believe there may be other victims." The words hit like thunder. Other victims? That meant this wasn't a one-time betrayal. It was part of something larger, a scheme. And suddenly, the situation felt even darker than before, because if this person had done this to me, how many others had they done it to? How many lives had they secretly invaded? How many people had trusted them just like I did? And as that terrifying realization settled in, I understood something chilling. This wasn't just about uncovering the truth. It was about stopping something that had been going on for too long. But I still didn't know the most shocking part yet, because when the police finally told me how they discovered the hidden camera files, it would reveal a twist that would completely change everything I thought I knew about that person. And when I heard it, I realized the betrayal went deeper than I had imagined.
I felt numb. Not the kind of numbness that brings calm, but the kind that comes when your mind is overloaded, when there's too much pain to process all at once. My hands rested on the edge of the dining table, gripping it tightly as if letting go might make everything collapse completely. The officer's words echoed in my head. There may be other victims. Other victims meant this wasn't random. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a desperate one-time betrayal. It was a pattern, a system, something calculated and repeated. And that realization made my stomach twist with a cold, creeping dread. I swallowed hard and forced myself to ask, "How did you find the footage?" The officer exchanged a glance with his colleague before answering. "Someone reported it." My heart skipped. "Reported it?" He nodded. "Yes. A cybercrime unit received an anonymous tip 2 weeks ago." For a moment, I didn't understand. An anonymous tip? 2 weeks ago? That meant this investigation had already been quietly unfolding before I even knew anything was wrong. Before the electricity bill. Before the phone call. Before I realized my home had been invaded. My mind raced. "Who tipped them?" I asked. The officer shook his head. "We don't know. The report came through an encrypted channel. That alone felt unsettling, because it meant someone out there knew about the operation, knew about the recordings, knew what was happening inside my apartment, but chose to stay hidden. And suddenly a chilling possibility formed in my mind. What if, my voice trembled, what if it was someone involved? The officer didn't dismiss the idea. That's possible, he said quietly. Sometimes operations like this fall apart because of internal conflicts. Internal conflicts. The phrase made everything feel darker, more complicated, because it suggested something I hadn't fully grasped yet. This wasn't just one person acting alone. This was organized, coordinated, and maybe even unstable. I felt a cold knot tightening in my chest. Did they find the person who did this? I asked. The officer hesitated. Then he said something that made my heart drop. Not yet. My stomach twisted painfully. Not yet. He nodded. The main suspect hasn't been located. The words hit like a shockwave, because until that moment, part of me had assumed they'd already been caught, that this nightmare had at least one clear endpoint. But now I realized the truth. The person who betrayed me was still out there. Fear crept into my chest, sharp and suffocating. Do they know I'm back? I asked quietly. The officer's expression softened slightly. We're taking precautions. But yes, it's possible they may find out. My pulse spiked instantly, because that meant something terrifying. The person who had secretly lived in my home, who had recorded me, who had planned everything so carefully, might know that I had discovered the truth. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to steady the shaking in my body. What happens now? I whispered. The officer spoke gently. Right now, our priority is securing evidence and tracking the suspect's digital footprint. He paused before adding something that made my heart pound even harder. And we'll need your cooperation. I nodded automatically, though my mind was still spinning. Anything. He placed a folder on the table. Inside were printed screenshots, messages, transactions, logs. I stared at them, my hands trembling as I flipped through the pages, because each one revealed something worse than the last. Conversations about equipment purchases, discussions about electricity usage, plans about scheduling access to the apartment. And then I saw something that made my breath catch. It was a chat screenshot, a private message thread, and the contact name at the top was unmistakable. It was the same person who had betrayed me, but they weren't talking about machines. They weren't talking about money. They were talking about me. My heart bounded violently as I read the lines. Target is away again. Schedule clear for 3 weeks. Continue recording cycle. Ensure files uploaded before return. Each sentence felt like a stab, because it confirmed something even more horrifying. They didn't just betray me. They treated me like an object, a target, a schedule, something to manage. My vision blurred as tears filled my eyes, because the emotion of impact hit deeper than anything else. This wasn't just someone making a bad decision. This was someone who had systematically stripped away my humanity. Someone who had watched my life like it was content, data, material. Then I saw another message that made my stomach drop completely. Expansion phase soon. Needed data locations. My hands rose. Additional locations. That meant one terrifying thing. My apartment wasn't the only place. This operation wasn't limited to me. It was part of something bigger. Something ongoing. I looked up at the officer, my voice shaking. How many? How many victims are there? He exhaled slowly. We're still investigating, but based on current data. He paused. We believe there may be several. Several. The word echoed heavily, because it meant this wasn't just my nightmare. There were others out there. Other people whose trust had been shattered. Other lives secretly invaded. And suddenly my pain felt mixed with something else. A deep, burning determination. Because this wasn't just about justice for me anymore. It was about stopping something that had hurt many people.
But just as that resolve started forming inside me, the officer said something that made my heart stop again. "There's one more thing you need to see." My chest tightened. "What now?" He slid one final document across the table. I looked down at it, and the moment I saw what it was, the world seemed to tilt. Because it wasn't a message. It wasn't a log. It wasn't a piece of evidence. It was a financial record. A transaction history. Showing payments. Large payments. Deposited into an account. An account that belonged to the person I trusted most. But that wasn't the part that made my heart drop completely. What shattered me was seeing the source of those payments. Because they weren't coming from strangers. They weren't coming from unknown buyers. They were coming from someone I knew. Someone very close to me. Someone I never would have suspected. And in that moment, I realized the betrayal wasn't just one person. It was bigger. Much bigger. Because the person behind this had help from someone inside my own circle.
I felt frozen, as if my body had been replaced by ice. My hands were still resting on the edge of the table, but they weren't doing anything. My mind was racing so fast it was almost painful, cycling through every possibility, every tiny interaction I had ever had with the person I trusted most. The officer noticed my silence and spoke carefully. "Do you recognize these names?" he asked, sliding a stack of papers toward me. I stared. The list contained usernames, codes, and contact details linked to the operation. My heart pounded. A few were familiar, old acquaintances, people I'd known casually over the years, harmless faces I would never have suspected. And there it was, the most shocking detail of all. A second person I knew intimately, someone from my personal life, showing up as part of this network. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't comprehend how deep this went. "Someone close to me involved?" I whispered, my voice cracking. The officer nodded, expression grave. Based on the evidence, yes, they were likely assisting with logistics, equipment, connections, monitoring activity. That was it. That one confirmation shattered any remaining sense of safety I had left. Not only had someone I loved betrayed me, but it wasn't even just their choice. They had a network. They had accomplices. They had been operating systematically, targeting not only me, but potentially dozens of others. And I had been blissfully unaware for months. I sank into a chair, my head in my hands. Every memory of trust, every shared laugh, every whispered confidence now felt tainted, repurposed as part of their plan. My apartment, my sanctuary, had been a hub of manipulation and exploitation, and I had never even suspected. The officer placed a hand on my shoulder, firm but careful. "You're not alone in this," he said quietly, "and we're going to do everything we can to find the others responsible." But those words, though meant to comfort, barely penetrated the storm inside me. I had known betrayal before, but never like this. Never someone so close, so calculating, so cold. I looked around the apartment again. The hum of the remaining equipment, though disconnected, seemed to echo my thoughts. Each wire, each fan, each pile of paper felt like evidence of deceit so complete it was almost surreal. And then I remembered the notebook, the meticulous schedules, the logs, the notes about my routines. Everything had been observed. Everything had been cataloged. I realized then that their betrayal wasn't just financial. It was psychological, emotional, personal. It hit me harder than anything else. This wasn't only a theft of electricity. It was a theft of my life. The police escorted me out of the apartment later that night, and I sat in my car for what felt like hours, staring at the building. The lights in my unit were off, but I could almost hear the echo of the machines, the ghosts of a life that had been intruded upon. Every room, every corner, every closet held secrets, and the thought that someone I trusted had orchestrated it all made my skin crawl. I had to process this, somehow. I thought about my friends, my family, the people who knew me, who would never dream of betraying me. But suddenly the safe bubble I had built around myself felt porous, fragile. My sense of reality was shaky, uncertain. And the worst part? I knew the person behind this was probably watching my reactions. They had recordings, logs. They knew I had returned, and that realization made my heart pound in fear. Sleep didn't come that night. I sat in the passenger seat of my car, staring at the dashboard clock as minutes crawled by. My phone buzzed intermittently, alerts from the police, messages from concerned friends, reminders of daily life, but everything felt distant, unreal. Every time I thought I was processing one layer of betrayal, another one emerged. And the more I thought, the angrier I became. Not just angry at the violation, not just angry at the stolen electricity or the destroyed privacy, but enraged at the audacity, the calculation, the coldness of it all. This was a person who had taken months to plan, who had manipulated me with precision, who had turned my life into a playground for their gain, and yet despite all that, they hadn't been caught. Morning came, but it didn't bring relief. It brought decisions, meetings with police, digital forensics, calls with lawyers, phone records, surveillance requests. Every step of the investigation added layers of complexity and anxiety, but it also brought clarity. I realized I couldn't just sit and wait. I couldn't let fear or shock paralyze me. I needed answers. I needed accountability. I needed to take back control of my life. The police finally handed over access to the data they had recovered from the hidden cameras, the laptops, and the messages. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to relive every intimate, private moment. But I had to, because understanding the extent of what had been done was the only way I could reclaim power. The files were methodically labeled, organized by dates, times, and events. Every single detail, every movement, every sound had been recorded. It was like watching my life being replayed by someone else, someone who had no regard for my privacy, my trust, or my humanity. And then I saw it, my face, my routines, my personal habits, documented, archived, analyzed. The violation hit me all over again, sharper than the first time. But beneath the shock, beneath the violation, a fire sparked. Because while they had stolen my privacy, they hadn't stolen my resolve. I realized something crucial in that moment. I couldn't undo the betrayal. I couldn't erase the invasion. I couldn't change the fact that someone I loved had hurt me in ways I had never imagined. But I could fight. I could reclaim my life. I could ensure that the truth came out. And that determination became a weapon, sharper than anger, stronger than fear. I scheduled a meeting with my attorney later that week. Every document, every screenshot, every log became ammunition for the legal battle ahead. The betrayal wasn't just emotional or financial, it was criminal, and the person responsible needed to face justice. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had spent months traveling for work, trusting my home was safe, thinking I was the one managing my life carefully, and in the meantime, someone I trusted had been manipulating the most intimate parts of it. The thought made my blood boil. But amidst the chaos, I also realized something else. I wasn't alone. Other victims existed. They were out there. And perhaps through the investigation, their voices could be heard too. This wasn't just my story. It was a story about betrayal, about trust, and about the danger of underestimating the people closest to us. And as I prepared to face the next phase of this nightmare, investigations, confrontations, and revelations, I knew that the journey ahead would be one of pain, but also of empowerment. Because betrayal had taken many things from me, but it would not take my voice. It would not take my fight. It would not take my resolve. And just as I was gathering my strength to move forward, the police delivered another piece of information, something that no one could have predicted, something that would change the stakes entirely. The moment I heard it, my blood ran cold. Because the betrayal wasn't just personal anymore. It was deeper, it was darker, and it was far from over.
I hadn't expected the call that came late that night. My phone buzzed with an unknown number, and my heart jumped instantly. Every nerve in my body screamed, warning me. But part of me, part of the part that had been hardened by the past weeks, knew I couldn't ignore it. I answered. The voice on the other end was calm, too calm, familiar in a way that sent chills down my spine. "Hello," it said. I froze. It was them, the one I had trusted most. My own voice shook. Why? Why are you calling me?" There was a pause, and then the words, "You know the truth now." I gritted my teeth. "The truth? You've ruined my life, my home, my privacy, everything I trusted, gone." They chuckled softly, almost affectionately. "Gone? No, you still have everything you need. You just didn't realize it before." I felt my blood boil. "What the hell are you talking about?" "I did what I had to do," they said, almost coldly. "You were away, I saw an opportunity, and I took it. You can't blame me for being resourceful." Resourceful. The word hit me like a slap across the face. "You invaded my home. You recorded me. You stole from me. That's not resourceful. That's criminal." My voice grew louder with each word. "And you'll pay for it." There was silence. Then a faint, almost amused sigh. "You think you can stop me? By now, I'm untouchable. You have no idea how deep this goes." I felt my knees weaken, but I forced myself to stand. "You're wrong. You may have thought you were untouchable, but you're not. I know everything now. The police have evidence, the logs, the recordings, the messages, and I will make sure the world knows." They laughed again, a low, unnerving laugh that sent shivers down my spine. "Evidence? That's funny. Did you think you were the only one I've been working with? There are others, many others, and you're just a small part of the game." The game. The word echoed like a death knell. They weren't just targeting me. They were orchestrating a network, a plan that I had unknowingly been trapped inside. And now, hearing them say it out loud, I felt the full weight of the danger. I gritted my teeth and forced myself to remain calm. "You won't get away with this. I'll expose everything. The authorities, the network, you'll be caught." There was a long pause, and then the chilling reply. "You're brave, I'll give you that, but brave isn't enough." The line went dead. I sank to the floor of my apartment, heart racing, mind spinning. Every scenario I had imagined over the past weeks now seemed tame compared to the reality. The person I trusted most had turned my life into a battlefield, and I was only beginning to understand the scale. My phone buzzed again, another message from the same number. "Watch your back. You're in deeper than you know." I felt a cold wave of fear, but beneath it, anger burned hotter. They wanted me afraid. They wanted me paralyzed, but I refused. I immediately called my attorney and the lead investigator. Within minutes, a secure team was assembled. Every piece of evidence I had gathered over the past month, screenshots, logs, recorded calls, photos, documents, was compiled into a dossier. This time, I wasn't just a victim. I was preparing for confrontation. The next day, the police returned to my apartment with digital forensic specialists. Every device, every network connection, every log was analyzed, and what they found made my stomach turn. The person I trusted most hadn't just been mining cryptocurrency. They had been using my apartment as a hub for illegal activity. They had recruited others, all using personal spaces without consent. And the most horrifying part, they had planned to scale this operation, expanding into multiple properties across the city. It wasn't just invasion, it was exploitation on a massive scale. I spent hours going through recovered messages and recordings with the officers. Everything was meticulous. Every date, every timestamp, every plan had been recorded in a notebook, organized like a manual. And as we traced the network, it became clear that their reach extended far beyond my apartment. Other victims existed, people whose lives had been quietly manipulated, recorded, and exploited. The magnitude of the betrayal was overwhelming. I wasn't just a victim of one person. I had been an unwitting part of a criminal operation. Then came the moment that shook me to my core. The investigators discovered a hidden folder on the laptop, a folder labeled with my initials. Inside, there were encrypted files. The files contained not just recordings from my apartment, but files apparently stolen from other people connected to me. Friends, colleagues, neighbors, names, schedules, routines, even passwords. The depth of the invasion was staggering. I stared at the screen, hands shaking, my face drained of color. This wasn't just about me. This was about total control, manipulation, and power, and I had unknowingly been at the center of it. By evening, the police had traced some of the network connections to several unknown locations. Surveillance had been set up, and a coordinated operation was planned. This was bigger than I had imagined, bigger than any betrayal I had faced before. And yet, amidst all the fear, there was a growing determination. I realized something crucial. They had underestimated me. They had assumed fear would silence me, that betrayal would paralyze me, that manipulation would control me. They were wrong. That night, I sat in my apartment, reviewing the evidence one last time. Every log, every screenshot, every message. I realized that I had proved not just of the invasion, but of the intent, planning, and systematic betrayal. I had proof that could dismantle the network, and I would use it, because this wasn't just about justice for me anymore. It was about preventing this from happening to anyone else. It was about reclaiming my life. It was about exposing the darkness hidden behind trust, love, and familiarity. But just as I began to feel a flicker of hope, a new notification appeared on my phone. It was a photo.
A simple, chilling image, my front door slightly ajar, and in the shadows, a figure barely visible. A warning, a reminder. They were still out there, and they knew I was fighting back. I clenched my fists, feeling fear and anger collide into resolve. This was the climax. The battle wasn't just legal or procedural anymore. It was personal, and it was dangerous. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't backing down. Not now, not ever. Because betrayal might have taken my trust, my home, and my peace of mind, but it could never take my courage, and I was ready to face them, whatever it took.
The days that followed were a blur of meetings, police reports, digital investigations, and endless phone calls. My life, which had always felt like something I could control, now existed in fragments. Every message, every screenshot, every log was a reminder of the trust that had been shattered. And yet, amidst the chaos, I felt something strange, a quiet sense of clarity. I realized that while betrayal had taken so much from me, it had also revealed something vital, my own strength. The police had been relentless. Teams of cybercrime specialists traced IP addresses, traced the cryptocurrency transactions, and tracked shipping records. My former confidant, the one whose betrayal had cut deeper than any other, was being hunted. Their accomplices, some hidden behind layers of encryption and false identities, were slowly being exposed. I watched it all unfold with a mix of fear and awe. Fear for what could happen if they struck again, awe at the sheer complexity of what had been orchestrated behind my back. And yet, through it all, I refused to feel helpless. It wasn't easy. There were nights I couldn't sleep, haunted by the thought that the person I trusted most had walked through my apartment, had watched my most private moments, had plotted against me for months. It was an emotional weight unlike anything I had ever carried. I found myself questioning everything, every smile, every gesture, every moment of intimacy. And yet, I reminded myself repeatedly, I wasn't broken. I was learning. I was growing. Betrayal, I realized, doesn't just hurt. It teaches. It exposes the weaknesses in our assumptions, the blind spots in our trust, and the fragility of the structures we take for granted. But it also reveals the strength we never knew we had. Weeks passed. Investigations intensified. The police uncovered more victims, others whose homes had been invaded, whose lives had been quietly manipulated. It became a network, an organized, systematic exploitation of trust. And yet, with each new revelation, I felt a strange sense of empowerment, because I was no longer just a victim. I was part of a movement exposing the darkness. My story, my evidence, became a crucial part of the case. And finally, one afternoon, the breakthrough came. The lead investigator called me. His voice was urgent, but there was a note of triumph I hadn't expected. "We have them," he said. My stomach tightened. "You mean caught?" "Not fully yet, but their location has been pinpointed and we've got enough evidence to bring them in safely." I felt a rush of relief, but it was tempered with a sharp edge of anticipation. I wasn't naive. I knew the person I trusted most had been calculating, unpredictable, dangerous. But I also knew something else. They had underestimated me. They had assumed fear would paralyze me, that betrayal would silence me, that exposure would weaken me. They were wrong. When the arrest finally happened, it was swift and decisive. I watched as police led the person I had trusted most out of the building, their face unreadable, their pride shattered. And in that moment, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief, rage, sorrow, and, strangely, closure. It was over. But closure doesn't erase pain. I spent the following weeks reclaiming my apartment, unplugging equipment, tearing out wiring, removing cameras, and restoring my home to a place of peace. Every wire I pulled, every device I destroyed, felt like reclaiming a piece of my life. I couldn't undo the past, but I could rebuild my sanctuary. I also learned something crucial about trust. It isn't blind, it isn't automatic, and it isn't guaranteed. Trust must be earned, verified, and sometimes defended. But the capacity to trust is also resilient. And despite what had happened, I realized I could still trust again, though more wisely, more carefully, and more deliberately. I shared my story publicly, cautiously at first, documenting the betrayal, the invasion, the criminal network, and the ultimate resolution. The response was overwhelming. Messages flooded in from strangers and friends alike, people who had experienced similar betrayals, who had been manipulated, exploited, or taken advantage of. I realized I wasn't alone, and in that realization, I found a new kind of strength. Betrayal, I realized,
isn't just personal, it's universal. It touches everyone in ways large and small. But what defines us is not the betrayal itself, it's how we respond. In the weeks that followed, I worked closely with the authorities to ensure that the entire network was dismantled. Victims were contacted and supported, evidence was submitted to courts, the legal system began to respond with arrests, charges, and the beginning of accountability. It was meticulous, exhausting work, but necessary. Justice isn't instant, it's deliberate, and sometimes it's painstaking. Through it all, I learned another lesson. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to act in spite of it. I also learned the importance of boundaries. To survive betrayal, to recover from it, I had to redefine my personal space, my expectations, my trust. I became more vigilant, yes, but also more self-aware. I realized that my life, my energy, and my peace are precious commodities, and while trust can be extended, it must never be naive. And yet, I also allowed myself to feel gratitude for the support of the police, for the clarity I gained through the ordeal, and for the opportunity to transform a devastating betrayal into a story that could warn and protect others. Months after the arrests, I finally returned to my normal routine, though life would never feel the same again. Every time I walked into my apartment, I felt a quiet vigilance, but I also felt pride. Pride in surviving, pride in confronting the darkness, and pride in refusing to let betrayal define me. I had faced the unimaginable. I had endured violation, exploitation, and deception on the deepest personal level. And yet, here I was, standing, unbroken, determined. My story isn't just about a stolen electricity bill. It's about the fragility of trust, the dangers hidden behind familiarity, the power of awareness, and the resilience of the human spirit. Betrayal can tear everything apart, but it can also reveal strength we never knew existed. And if there's one lesson I want anyone watching this to take away, it's this. Even when trust is shattered, even when the people we rely on deceive us, we have the power to reclaim our lives. We have the power to expose the truth. We have the power to survive. And ultimately, we have the power to rise stronger than ever before. Looking back now, I understand the full scope of what happened. I understand how calculated it all was. I understand the darkness that someone I loved was capable of. But I also understand this. Betrayal, no matter how deep, does not define us. Our actions afterwards do. And I chose action. I chose courage. I chose to reclaim my life. Even today, I remain vigilant. Even today, I protect my privacy, my home, and my trust carefully. But I also live with a renewed sense of awareness, a deeper understanding of human nature, and an unwavering commitment to myself. The person I trusted most is behind bars. Their network is dismantled. And my life, though scarred, has been reclaimed. Because betrayal can take many things from us, but it cannot take our strength, our voice, or our will to fight back. And that ultimately is the truth I want everyone to hear.